of the theist brain. I'm going to show you the inside of the atheist brain. Where are you here? I got to get B on the right. Here we go. All right, so it's a joke, okay? It's a joke. He called God a delusion, and he sold 2 million copies. This is as bad as I'm going to be here about the atheist. So what have we learned in the last couple of years about atheism and cognitive science? What we've learned is this: there's a not just a correlation between atheism and autism. It's been shown that autism mediates atheism. Let me just give you some of the studies. The first study was done with discussion forums and internet questionnaires, and the discussion forums were mostly of young people that are or have been diagnosed as autistic, and there are discussion forums where they can come together as a group and discuss, how to go through life with one another, with like-minded people. And in the discussion forums, what the initial studies did was they coded people based on the comments they made. They did two things. One is they did a kind of intuitive coding for where someone might fall in an autism spectrum. And there's a wide range in an autism spectrum. I'll show you the range in just a little bit. My wife's not autistic at all. She thinks I am. So I'm a little bit higher up on the scale. At any rate, they would intuitively code where they thought people might go on the autism scale. And then they looked, because people sometimes discuss religious beliefs, they looked at how they identified themselves as religious believers. That's the initial set of studies. And then what they did was they contacted some of these folks. And so they looked at them in a discussion forum, and they had them fill out internet questionnaires. And what they found was this, is that the higher up you are in the autism scale, the less likely it is that you are to have religious beliefs, or the less likely you are to be sure of your religious beliefs. And again, the correlation goes the other way. The lower down you are on the autism scale, the more neurotypical you are, the more likely you are to have religious beliefs. We've already shown that it's normal, natural to have religious beliefs. But it looks like if there's a cognitive defect, some kind of cognitive defect, people are less likely to have religious beliefs. So this set of studies was the first that showed that there seemed to be a correlation between autism and religious belief. And in subsequent studies, high-functioning autistics, so fairly high up in the scale, can be just slightly below people with Asperger's, but people with Asperger's and then other high-functioning autistics, they're 2 to 3 times as likely to identify as atheists. So it's pretty statistically significant. And I'm not going to go into, I have to see what time it is so I don't, 9/11. Okay, we've got plenty of time. What Sharif and Nor and Zion have done is more sophisticated studies with, instead of relying on people who identify themselves on the internet, they've gone and have a large group of people that have been diagnosed as autistic, and they've gone and given them these questionnaires where, given the questionnaires, you can place where somebody might fall on the autism scale. And you can find these online, and the person that's done some of the best work on it is Simon Baron Cohen at Cambridge. He's one of the leading autism researchers, and I'm going to mention his. I always get a chuckle when I mention this in America, because everyone thinks I'm joking when I say Simon Baron Cohen, because they think it's Sacha Baron Cohen. I thought they were brothers. Cousins. All right, so cousins, whatever. They are related, I know that. But I usually get a chuckle in the U.S. because people believe then they think, from this point on, they think I'm making everything up. They think they're waiting for someone to come in. Forget it. So anyway, the Simon Baron Cohen, what he argues fairly convincingly is that what's what's the thing that's going wrong in the autistic brain? And what he argues is what's going wrong in the autistic brain is that they lack a theory of mind. He calls it a mentalizing deficit. And think what that would be. You don't see other people's, you don't immediately get other people's thoughts, feelings, and desires. They don't register, and so you don't respond to them as a person. I had a student who was diagnosed Asperger's, and she didn't need a diagnosis. We all knew, and she would come to our offices, and she would talk and talk and talk and talk and just drone on and on and on, and you would give the clues that, you know, you'd move over, and you try to give the normal clues that it's time to go, and she couldn't pick up any clues, and you often had to just kind of push her out the door, and she'd go down the hall and she'd just be talking the whole time. She wouldn't stop talking. And she lacked the ability to understand another person. So what Sharif and Nor and Zion did was they located people on an autism scale. And again, you can go online and do this. There's an autism spectrum quotient. You can find out if you want. If you're a professor, I'm going to give you a good reason not to do it. But you can go online and do it. And they ask questions like, do you like to chit-chat? Do you like to be alone or work with or hang around other people? Most of them are kind of obvious what they're getting at, and some of them aren't so obvious. But there are 40 or 50 questions, and you can go through and fill out these questions and find out where it is you might fall in an autism scale. And so they ranked people on the autism scale, and then they tried to identify what is it that's mediating belief in God. And so what they wanted to figure out is not just what is the correlation. That correlation, they figured out the correlation was about right, that had been figured out in the previous studies. They wanted to see, well, what's the cause? What mediates it? And it turns out what mediates it is mentalizing deficits. There's something else autistics tend to do. They tend to be systemizers. They tend to put things in sort of rational, systematic. They like to so they'll ask, like, do you like to do the same things over and over again? If your schedule is interrupted, something is asked. And so they tend to be systemizers. And what they found out was that it's not the systemizer part that mediated religious belief. It was the mentalizing deficit. In fact, there are many high-functioning autistics that have religious beliefs, but they tend to be highly systemized. They tend to be fairly abstract, fairly kind of mathematical, rational. They tend to like rituals. They tend to figure out that it's good for them to be in communities, and they go to church and do things they know are good for them. So they've got it in like a rational system. So it wasn't the systemizer part that's common to high-functioning autistics that was mediating it. It was the mentalizing deficit. And it's easy to figure out why, really. If God is a person, or if the kind of normal, typical religious beliefs are of God as a person, then if you lack the ability to cognize persons, you're going to lack the ability to have belief in a personal God. You're not going to be able to have it. You're going to be psychologically prevented from having it. Lacking theory of mind, which looks like it's essential to having, being able to acquire a belief in God, looks like it's going to be a pretty obvious candidate for the thing that's preventing people from belief in God.